Talk about those nice people from Slough. My name is Feargal Sharkey. I'm chairman of the Ammo Magna fishery, and it's Wednesday night, and for some strange, unaccountable reason, I find myself in Rochester.
Enjoy.
The simple truth is, I have this old hobby that I've had for 50 years of my life, and it involves standing around in rivers, waving bits of carbon fibre around with little flies attached to the end of it, trying to catch trout. I've always, since I was a kid, had an enormous passion for fly fishing. And in later in life, I find myself chairman of the oldest fly fishing club in England, a little thing called the Ammo Magna fishery. And about 6 or 7 years ago, we found ourselves in the position of working with a wonderful little charity called Fish Legal, of having to plan and having to take the Environment Agency to the High Court over water quality and lack of water, where our river was beginning to suffer what's called eutrophication. In other words, 2.5 miles of chalk stream, some of the finest, most pristine river on the planet, was becoming a 2.5 mile long stagnant pond. Now, we're a very resourceful bunch at the Ammo Magna fishery, and we managed to get our little issues resolved quite quickly, but that just made me curious as to why 60 men and women who just want to go fishing on a Sunday morning found ourselves having to try and take the Environment Agency to the High Court. And that made me curious. And foolishly and stupidly, I started scratching around. And at that point, I realized that the country was festooned with little community groups. The Friends of the Mimram, the River Vera Society, the River Chess Association, the Friends of the River Rib, the River Bean, and endless little community groups like SOS Whitstable that might not have the knowledge and the technical expertise and background, but knew from experience there was something badly going wrong with their beach, their swimming patch, their stretch of coastline, their river, the little stream in the backyard. And it turned out that the whole system of regulation, of oversight of the water industry had basically collapsed, and the water industries have been abusing that weakness of regulation and that weakness of regulation for the better part of 30 years. Well, listen, you can start with the fact that almost 10% of Thames water is owned by the Chinese government. Do you really think the Chinese government really care about what's going on a beach in Northern Kent? Whether or not Southern Water are dumping huge amounts of sewage along the coast. Southern Water, of course, nowadays being owned by an Australian venture capital fund called Macquarie Bank, who's not a bank, it's a venture capital fund, who previously used to own Thames Water. And there is a point of view, one I would subscribe to, that when they owned Thames Water, they bled the company dry, left it with the better part of £10 million worth of debt, and then just sold the carcass on to someone else. Obviously, they're not going to repeat that sort of thing with Southern Water, or are they? The mechanism's all there. It always has been. The law's there. In fact, the Secretary of State right now could fix the whole thing with nothing more than a stroke of a pen. There is a thing called an enforcement order where the Secretary of State can legally commit and bind and force water companies to make the scale of investment needed to fix this situation, to stop paying dividends, to stop paying out colossal interest payments, to stop paying chief executives bonuses and salaries measured in multiples of millions of pounds, to invest the level of money we need to get this sorted. And if they fail to comply with that instruction, the Secretary of State can fine every water company up to 10% of their annual turnover. Now, I suspect taking 10% of Southern Water's turnover away from them might help focus a few minds in that boardroom. There are 2 companies in this country, England, that the water company grades as single 1-star companies. Massive, colossal failure of environmental performance, Step Forward, South West Water and Southern Water. And that's why if you go and have a look, Surfers Against Sewage provide a fantastic service where pretty much in real-time notification of sewage dumping along the coast, and pretty much without fail, every time it rains, the whole of the south coast and up round Kent, all the way from Southampton up into the Thames estuary will light up, and Southern Water are dumping copious amounts of sewage all over southern England, right along that coastline, right up into Thanet and into the Thames estuary. And by the way, that's coming from a company that just over a year ago was fined £90 million for illegally dumping sewage into the coast. It appears not much has changed in their behaviour since they had that fine.
We saw almost 3,000 discharges of untreated sewage into UK coastal bathing waters, and over 200,000 into our UK rivers.
The simple truth is, what we're seeing is the physical manifestation of 30 years of lack of political oversight, a regulatory system that has completely failed and is incapable and proved itself incapable of properly regulating the water industry. That created a massive vacuum, and the water companies gamed the system. They filled that vacuum and they've gamed the system to their benefit. By way of example, water companies have paid out £72 billion in dividends to their shareholders, and we've ended up with rivers and beaches full of effluent and full of waste.